welcome to Blogged and Reported. I'm Katie Herzog, and joining me while Jesse is backseat driving a Waymo around San Francisco, we have Helen Lewis. Helen, welcome back.
Hello, I'm very excited to be here. I was with Jesse last week, so it feels like I've got custody of you on you've got custody of me on different weekends, basically.
You know what? It is unfair to me that you and Jesse have seen each other in person, and you and I are only internet friends.
I know. One day I'll make it to the Pacific Northwest, but
you should.
They put it a long way away from England, which was cruel of them. I'm angry with God about that one.
They did. I also hope to get to England at some point, but not until Moose dies, so it's going to be like 20 years.
Well, we can only hope.
Maybe 30. Okay, Helen, welcome back. You need no introduction, but I'm going to give you one anyway. Helen Lewis is a staff writer at The Atlantic, the author of, among others, the 2025 book, The Genius Myth, and the person everyone wishes hosted this podcast. So, Helen, you're just back from the U.S. How was your trip?
I actually really liked it. The first time I went to San Francisco a year ago, I was really freaked out by it. I was like, where is everyone? The downtown looked like a kind of post-zombie apocalypse, right? Like it was just empty apart from these really disturbed and troubled people.
The fentanyl lean, I'm familiar.
Right, a lot of that and a lot of shopping carts slumping,
yes.
Which was just really horrible because those were the only people who were out on the streets.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether or not so Daniel Lurie, the mayor, has been in for a little while now. He's had a big plan to rejuvenate the downtown, get shoppers and tourists back. But the last two times I've been there, it has felt more like, a normal city, but that has got some problems, right? But it is weird. So I was staying in Mountain View for the conference, and there are like RVs parked on the road. And I was like, what are these for? And they're for tech workers who just can't afford to. Yeah,
Wow. So these are not homeless. Well, I guess they are homeless people, but they're homeless coders,
right? But presumably people who are, either they're on an HB1 and they just want to try and save as much money before they get kicked out, or they're people who haven't been able to get together a deposit despite working in a tech job. But yeah, no, the people coming out of them did not look like they were on their uppers. They looked like people who were just, working a normal job but having to live in a camper van in the back streets of Mountain View.
That's van life. Maybe they are preparing for the inevitable AI apocalypse. They're just going to work and then move back into the RV because that's all they'll be able to afford.
Yeah. Well, I mean, California housing is probably the apocalypse has already happened, right?
That's true. That's true. What's more expensive, London or San Francisco?
Oh, San Francisco. Like the average house price in Marin County, just across the bay, is over $2 million. And that's the average. Whereas the average British house price, even in London, is £500,000.
Really? I'd steal. But you do make British money. Right. Not you, but other people do make British money. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, outside of London, England, the rest of in the country is as poor as Mississippi, right? It's in terms of salaries. So it's hard to compare.
But how's the literacy rate?
There's a considerably fewer banjos here, which I'm in favour of. But I can't comment on anything else. But yeah, so I kind of, California has grown on me a little bit after not initially liking it. And I was worried at the conference because I thought Jesse was kind of the only person that I knew, and I really worried it was going to be like my first day of school, and I was going to I have to just kind of hang around with him at the lunch table and be like,
yeah, and it's Jesse, so it's like the worst. It's like you have the worst friend. You've saddled yourself with the biggest loser at the tech conference.
They love Jesse. He did a session on misinformation, and it was very well attended. And it didn't turn into like a group therapy session about people's problems with Ben Collins. It was just a really interesting. Yeah, right, exactly. It was just a really interesting kind of discussion from lots of academics and a journalist. No, it was good.
All right. Well, that's enough about Jesse. We have a lot to talk about today. In the second half of the show, we're going to be discussing 2010's feminism and the soon-to-be-released Throuple memoir by Lindy West. Helen is also going to stay on after the free show to answer questions submitted by our Primo subscribers. But before we get to that, Helen, a lot has happened on your little island in the past few weeks. Prince Andrew was arrested. You wrote a piece about that in The Atlantic. So is Peter Mandelson, the former UK ambassador to the US, both implicated in the Epstein files. There's also the Rotherham rape inquiry. I want to get your take on that in a bit. But the most important story coming out of the UK is that a man with Tourette's syndrome shouted a racial slur, the bad one, at Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo at the BAFTAs while they were on stage presenting an award. And I wanted to talk to you about this specifically because you've written about Tourette's. So let's start with that. Now, Jessica the 80s Baby explained to me that there's a very important backstory here that Americans probably don't understand. So can you explain that?
Yeah, I caught up with this on Sunday night San Francisco time just before getting on my plane. So it had already happened on British time Sunday night. And then the Americans got a free whack at it for several hours when all the Brits had gone to bed, which I think was bad for the discourse. Because the two things emerged. One was that a lot of people commenting, particularly people commenting from like like a race commentator perspective, right? That's how they see themselves, as somebody who comments on black issues, didn't really understand what Tourette's is.
Right.
That was another problem. And so they didn't understand that it's like not only is it an involuntary tic, if you've got coprolalia, which relatively few people with Tourette's have, but also the whole point of it is you say like literally the worst thing that you could possibly say. So you walk into the TSA check-in line and you go like, I've got a bomb.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. Or like someone shows you their adorable new baby and you go, got a fat face. Don't think you're really the father. Like just the most socially inappropriate thing you can is exactly how it works, right? So
I
it's
think
not
I
a
might
coincidence.
have that.
Right. I think it's podcaster's disease in many ways. So it's not a coincidence that he said it at two black actors, because it'd be like, what is the exact worst thing that you could say when you see two black actors?
Right.
And he said it.
And
so that was one.
He is named, what's his name?
He's John Davidson.
Right.
And this was the second part of it. So Kat Rosenfeld wrote about it in the Free Press. And I was kind of surprised because she said, once when I found out why John Davidson was at the BAFTAs,
right,
my soul left my body. And that said to me that I think if someone as well informed as Kat had not kind of got the backstory to this, then people were coming to this without a lot of the necessary information to make sense of it.
He's not a known figure in the US.
Right, exactly. So he's a Scottish guy who has been the subject of multiple BBC documentaries. The first one was called John's Not Mad, which was in like 1988, 89.
And mad in this case, does that mean crazy or angry?
Crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, like John's not insane, essentially. Right. And it's one of the, if you watch it, it's such like a window into a golden age of like lost accents. But essentially it's about, he lives in this relatively small Scottish city. And he's got one of those great Scottish accents, but he just shouts out socially inappropriate things. And there's quite a sweet scene where they go to the Tourette support group. And one of the things that also happens with people is they get echolalia. So they shout out things that they've heard other people shout. So unfortunately, if you get a lot of people...
Like a very filthy parrot.
Right, but if you get a lot of people with Tourette's together, they can kind of set each other off, like a little chorus. But it's which is quite sweet. They're all shouting like, your dog's got ginger pubes. Your dog's got tits is one of them. And then there's another one that says, you've dyed your pubes ginger. And then the support worker then tries to say you can claim incapacity benefit, and she ends up saying capacity. And they all fall about laughing because they're like, oh, miss, like you've called it off us, miss. And I think, there's a real thing in British culture of like that. No, it's the way the documentary presents it is it's like a burden for John, right? Like this is just and the film that he was there for the BAFTAs, it's made out of his life story. It's called I Swear, and it's about the fact he goes to court, for example, to testify, and he says, I promise to tell the truth. No, I won't. And the judge won't listen to him and take him seriously. He gets terribly beaten up because he accidentally sexually harasses a woman, and then her boyfriend comes and like beats him to within an inch of her life.
It's not funny, and yet I can't stop laughing.
No, it is funny. And because you talk to people with, I interviewed, for the first piece, I interviewed a guy called Glenn Cooney who's got Tourette's. And he said, I just can't help but laugh at it because the tics are so absurd. So he's like, I saw a Chinese woman in the supermarket and he said, and I went, konnichiwa. And he's like, I know that's Japanese.
Yeah.
I know in my conscious brain, I know that's Japanese.
You start that piece with this great line. Halfway through our conversation, Glenn Cooney calls me a four-letter word often cited as the most offensive in the English language, but that's okay. He doesn't mean it. Was he Australian?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, also very Scottish as well. Like the C word is like an affectionate word over there. But that was the thing that kind of influenced me because I think he might have called me fat as well.
Oh.
But like he's got Tourette's. He can't help it.
Yeah, and so there's a greater awareness of this in the UK in part because of this particular man.
Yeah, exactly.
Who called Michael B. Jordan a slur.
Right, and there was a series of Big Brother, our reality TV show, with a guy called Pete who also had.
Do you only have one reality TV show?
Yeah, it's our one. It's the allocated one by quota, but like that's the original one here, right? That's the 1999 very first one, and Pete won it. And the other thing is that this guy's got an OBE,
which is a British
Order of the
award,
British Empire. Yeah. So he went to visit the Queen, and he, by all accounts, shouted "Fuck the Queen!" Not the Queen.
And that's why the Queen's dead.
No, that was Liz Truss that killed the Queen. But and then he called now King Charles a fucking parasite.
Fair.
And the thing is that because she'd been forewarned, and frankly, I think the Queen had heard a lot worse. She kind of just styled it
Probably
out.
from Prince Harry.
Right. But that's to me is a really interesting set of questions about this, is that everybody's sort of searching for, like, were people briefed? Was there a microphone near him? Like, should the BBC have edited out? Every story in Britain that becomes a controversy eventually becomes a BBC controversy. And my take on why that happened in this case is that there were lots of people who couldn't manage the competing rights in this case. So that there's two things. One of which has got to happen is, one, we've either got to tell black celebrities on a big night that they've got to put up with having, like, very humiliatingly and demeaningly having racial slurs shouted at them, or two, you've got to tell a disabled guy that he has to be locked in a cupboard and he's not allowed to go in public anymore. And so everyone was trying to hunt for a secret option number 3 by which would make this magically okay. And I think that's why everyone started to focus on that. Well, what if there was a microphone near him? What if the BBC hadn't done it?
Yes.
Because and the thing that it reminded me of, I'm sure she won't mind me saying that she made this point. Becca, my friend, said it's a bit like really the babies on the wedding or the babies on the airplane discussion, right?
Yeah.
If someone brings a baby on a plane, your heart sinks. Everyone's heart sinks. No one looks on this with joy, and anyone who says they are is lying. But it is absurd and restrictive to say that people with children should be banned from all public life in case, I'm trying to get a bit of rest on a transatlantic flight. So someone's just got to budge. And the question is, who in this situation has got to budge? And people just don't feel comfortable saying it's the actors you've just got to put up with this.
Right. Yeah, so the BBC they failed to edit out him shouting the slur before the broadcast, which does seem like a serious misstep. They do edit they edit the broadcast. People were complaining that another person said "Free Palestine," and that was edited. I think that's incorrect. Like, somebody, I don't even know who this person was. It was a British actor, never heard of him. There are time limits to the speeches, and the BBC, and the Free Palestine comment came like 2 minutes and 30 seconds into this thank you speech. They edited it down to 1 minute, so I think that was a little bit unfair. But yes, probably setting the man with Tourette's in a seat near a microphone, which they did, also probably a mistake.
But we don't know whether or not that microphone was switched on, right? This is from John Davidson's statement afterwards. He said, and he took himself out after it. And then there was a thing of, why didn't he apologize? And he did apologize.
Yes.
So you were just getting a lot of wildly uninformed takes. I mean, the biggest person who reacted to it instantly was Jamie Foxx, the actor.
Right. I have his tweet pulled up here.
Oh yeah, go on. Read his tweets out to me, because this is quite funny.
It looks like it was on Instagram, actually. He said, out of all of the words you could have said, Tourette's made you say that. Nah, he meant that shit. Unacceptable. Which, this shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what Tourette's is. He didn't mean it. That's what it is. It's involuntary. There's an American girl who has Tourette's, who has a reality TV show. She's constantly saying that Joe Biden is buried in her backyard and her mom has crabs. Do we think that, do we need to dig up her backyard? I mean, Jamie Foxx should watch the documentary or the movie. He doesn't mean it. It is literally involuntary. Do you understand sort of the mechanism behind Tourette's?
There's a very good blog by Sophie Scott, friend of the podcast, on her Substack about this. But her explanation, and apologies to her if I'm mangling it, is that there are essentially 2 communication systems in the brain, a kind of involuntary one that is older, like a legacy of when we were just vocalizing. So that's yelps and ticks and swear words, right? In the sense that if you hit your hand with a hammer, you just go, fucking hell, right? You don't go, my God, that really hurt. I really wonder whether or not I broken it. Like, it's just, it's connected in some much more primal way. And then layered on top of that, you have your conscious ability to speak. So even people, I think, who get aphasia after a stroke, they lose some words. They might not lose the involuntary. I don't think really I would encourage if you know someone who's got a stroke to go up and startle them and see what happens. That seems cruel. But like those are just two different things. So you can end up, I think, getting the wires getting a bit fritzed. And the other thing that Sophie points out is there's really not particularly good treatments for it. I think one of the things they've tried is like antipsychotics, but this is why it was big. When I wrote about the contagious tics, which was another piece that I wrote during the pandemic, the essentially TikTok tics, they were actually functional neurological disorder. They were a software glitch in some sense. So it was very important.
And you mean in terms of the fakers or in terms of people with actual tics? Which one's the software glitch?
I don't think they are faking per se in the sense of malingering or doing it deliberately. I think it's something closer to you wouldn't use the Freudian term anymore of conversion disorder, but I think it's more like, in the same way that you can get pseudo-epilepsy, right? You can have people who fall down and have fits, and if you monitor their brain activity, they don't have the signature brain.
Right. It's psychosomatic.
Yes, it is. But and people get very upset about you using that word because they think it means they're putting it on. But people aren't like deliberately putting it on. It's their body's way of kind of showing them that the situation is intolerable or it's under some kind of terrible stress.
Well, but then you also see those, and I believe you wrote about this, the multiples. Did you write about that?
No, they are putting it on.
They are, yeah. Those are
in my view.
You can tell because they're setting up a camera, like changing outfits, like moving from one couch to another, having conversations with each other. Yeah, that seems also doesn't exist.
I mean, we might talk about this in terms of some of the stories that have come out of Epstein and grooming gangs, but when anybody's story of trauma is incredibly cinematic and full of very rich and vivid detail that is scintillating and amazing, you should automatically kind of have a little winking light on your dashboard. And the same thing when the form that someone's mental illness take is them being able to perform in front of a camera 8 different personas where they've got a different voice for each one, and and they've all got a fully developed personality. If you've ever seen anybody in the grip of really difficult psychotic breakdown, it's just not coherent in that way.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna read some more tweets, some more responses to this. So yes, so Black celebrities very incensed about this. Jamel Hill asking for more grace for the person who shouted a racist slur instead of for Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, who had to push through being embarrassed in front of their peers. But that's often the expectation that Black people are just supposed to be okay with being disrespected and dehumanized so that other people don't feel bad. Yeah, he did apologize.
I do feel sympathetic to that because, I'm on team, like, it was really rough for Taylor Swift when Kanye West stormed the stage at the VMAs and told her that actually Beyonce should have won and she wasn't any good, right? Like, that was her big night. Right. And that happening to you in front of a number of people.
But he presumably had some control over although it's Kanye, so who knows?
Well, it's bipolar, yeah. I mean, but that's the thing. So I think you can hold in your head the fact that it was hard for those actors. Like, they clearly had not been briefed adequately or had not read the briefing or whatever had happened. Like, they didn't take it in their stride. They were clearly knocked back by it, as you kind of would be.
As you would be. Yes, yeah. Wendell Pierce said, it's infuriating that the first reaction wasn't complete and full-throated apologies to Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan. The insult to them takes priority. It doesn't matter the reasoning for the racist slur. I think it does matter, but okay.
I also think it's a bit hard in that John lives his entire life having to apologize constantly to people. And this was another difference, is that I think that Americans took the racial insult as being the most important thing, whereas Brits were more likely to look at it from a class-based perspective, which was that these guys are, after this, they're going to go back to their life of being successful millionaires. Right. John is going to go back to his life of being a social outcast who works as a caretaker and was worried every time he leaves the house that he's going to shout something at the wrong person and get beaten up.
Yeah.
Like on the oppressed minority scale. Yes. The bit that broke my heart is that he took his bike, like push bike, to the BAFTAs because he doesn't like getting on public transport in case he ticks at people. And then someone, this is being London, stole his bike while he was in there. I know. I want to buy him a bike.
Yeah, you should buy him a bike. Let's do a GoFundMe for John.
No, I hope if there was a crowdfunder, I would 100% contribute to it that is my feeling, is that like he lives a tough, marginalized life. Like it's hard. He's got a little rubber ring that he tries to bite down on so that he doesn't tick. But it doesn't. But so one of the ways they can tell if it's a Tourette's tick is that you have called the premonitory urge. So it's like a sneeze. You know it's coming,
but you can't stop it.
Yeah. And you can hold it in to some extent for a little bit, but actually that's very stressful. And then you might kind of tick worse. And it can be physical too. So John has ended up like punching his mum
Oh, wow.
while she was driving him. Like it's, you know, you can flail out with your arms. It's like being cursed. I mean, it's really, you know, and I think there's a lot of respect for him as a public figure for remaining upbeat, particularly when you saw those documentaries where he's in the first one, he's literally just like an adolescent. He's a kid. You know, and it said, oh, this was a heartbreaking. It said, since John is an adolescent, a lot of his thoughts often revolve around sex, particularly when he sees a pretty woman.
Man.
And I was like, who wants that as a teenager, right? That you just get horny and then you just shout, I'm very extremely horny.
Yeah. And then Kat pointed out in her piece in the Free Press that this sort of irony of the fact that people were there to celebrate this fictionalized version of him and the actor who played John in this film. What's the film called?
I swear.
I swear. He won a BAFTA for, I believe, Best Actor or something like that. And so at the same time, while they're celebrating sort of the fictionalized version of this, you know,
this comes back to the point that is often made by enemy of the pod, Freddie DeBurr, which is about the gentrification of disability, right? Which is, and actually there's another brilliant piece that I would urge you to read, which is on The Guardian by Hannah Jane Parkinson about her bipolar disorder, in which she says it's not like a broken leg, that people like stories of, you know, someone overcoming their mental illness, but that's not how it is for lots of conditions. You know, you don't get over bipolar, you kind of live with it. Schizophrenia, in the case of Freddie, like, you know, and they're unpleasant and they can
wait, I don't think Freddie has schizophrenia. I think
what does he have?
Bipolar, yeah.
But you know, whatever the disorder might be, it can just, you know, you live with it and you might get better for a bit, but you might relapse and it might make you act in ways that are kind of prickish and unpleasant, right? Everybody wants either the kind of uplifting struggle narrative or they want the kind of cousin Helen in What Katie Did, right? Where you're just a little suffering angel and you don't impose on anybody else and you're grateful for all the sympathy you receive.
Did you read Kanye's apology in the Wall Street Journal, his ad?
The thing is that it was quite reasonable and it read like someone who'd got back on their meds, but I just also can think if I was anybody in his life, I'd kind of want to wait a few months and see if that really took.
Yeah. He also, the timing was, you know, it was like 4 days before his album came out, although I haven't heard much about the album. I don't know if it actually came out. So I think that made people suspicious, but I thought I was fairly convinced by it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's part of his bipolar.
Well, you know, yeah, it's really, I think it's really tricky because it's about two competing goods, and I don't think the kind of prevailing liberal social justice framework is very good at dealing with that, right? Is it, you know, and you see it comes up in, I mean, obviously it comes up in the gender debate about like, do we want to let trans women express their identities or do we want women, biological females, to be able to have spaces of their own? And it's like you kind of have to pick one in certain circumstances. You can't make everybody happy. And you know, there's religious context about that too. Like do you have to ice the gay cake if you're a religious baker? Like someone just has to lose when you know, in those situations.
What do you think about the gay cake? Do you think that he should have to ice the gay cake? What if it's a gender reveal? Even worse.
Even worse. I think the way that the British law came down on that, and actually I think it was a gay couple who wanted to stay in B&B, which is if you're providing public services, you have to obey the law.
Right.
Like no one is making you have to be a baker.
I think that's how it comes down in the US too. Public accommodations. You cannot tell someone they cannot stay at your hotel, but you can tell someone, I will not perform this artistic act. I won't cater your wedding, which actually sounds fair to me. That sounds like a fair balance. We don't want to have a situation where gay people or black people or trans people aren't allowed at the diner, but should I be forced to endorse some message I don't agree with? Well, if you're a pharmacist, maybe, but if you're a cake baker, I think not.
Yeah, I think to me the most obvious thing about it was the kind of US UK thing,
right?
And I think, as I say, that was partly about class versus race. It was also about kind of level of Tourette's education. But there were some pretty bad British takes too. Did you see this is my favorite one, and I think this was satire, but like very much on the edge, was if I had Tourette's, my tics would be shouting trans rights, vote, and Black Lives Matter because I'm a good person.
That was a good one. Hard to tell. Was there a Free Palestine flag in the bio? Hard to tell on that one.
There was a red triangle. So it was like, and then there was another one that said, a lot of slave owners
I
were
saw that one
disabled.
as well.
And that just amused me because I just thought, is that the logical end of the DoorDash discourse, right? Which is I have to order DoorDash because I can't leave the house. Is I have to own a slave because I can't leave the house. It's actually ableist. Abolition is ableist.
That's true.
Yeah.
There was one besides the BBC not censoring this. There was one other major fuck up. So Google sent out a notification there was an article from the Hollywood Reporter, how the Tourette's fallout unfolded at the BAFTA Film Festival. And I can't even
Go on, I'll say it. The link thing said see more on N words. And it was like that was like the category tag page. And you were like, oh God, how did that happen?
Not good. Not good. So this is what happens when you let AI take over your headline writing. Okay. Anything else you want to say about that?
I think he also called Paddington Bear a pedo, if that can be taken into evidence.
What do you think is under that trench coat?
Well, it's a little person. No, genuinely. There's a Paddington stage musical, and the bear is played by two little people. Yeah,
two. Are they stacked on top of each other?
Not at the same time. No, not in a trench coat. No, they alternate because it's presumably quite sweaty and unpleasant in there.
Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. Okay, Helen, another UK story crossed my time this week. And as soon as it was posted, for the next 12 hours, it seemed to be the only thing on my feed. I think this was when Britons were sleeping. So this was more from Americans than from Brits. So this was posted by Rupert Lowe. And he writes, a statement from the Rape Gang Inquiry. So let me read you a bit from that. It's long, so I'm just going to sort of bop around. Our inquiry panel has heard extensive and deeply distressing testimony from a survivor detailing prolonged and extreme abuse, exploitation, and trafficking beginning in childhood and continuing over a number of years across multiple locations in the kingdom. ... Given the gravity of the allegations, we have thought long and hard about whether to release the following information. We believe, as does she, that the public deserves to know the truth about the rape gangs. The survivor's violent rape gang and abuse began at age 12. She was raped multiple times per day over many years. The rapes were filmed and were used as blackmail. The survivor has stated that multiple police officers were active perpetrators. Money was exchanged openly and destroyed her ability and willingness to seek help. Police vehicles were used to traffic her, and some of the abuse events were called cop nights. The extreme pain she suffered included film torture in places called red rooms. The torture included waterboarding and strangulation by rope. Distressingly, she was raped by a dog, filmed, and forced to rewatch the footage as men place bets. The coordination of this specific type of abuse was predominantly permitted by Pakistani heritage men. During the specific period of abuse, he witnessed the murder of at least 3 girls, one of whom was allegedly killed as punishment for speaking to the police force. My first thought when I read this was, A, what kind of dog? And B, there's no way this happened. And yet no one on X seemed to be displaying the slightest hint of doubt. It was taken for granted that this is obviously true. And maybe it is. There are some cases like that of Giselle Pellicot, the French woman who was drugged and raped by her husband and dozens of other men. Cases like that show you that stories that sound too bad to be true are sometimes real. And, maybe I'm just on high alert for the return of satanic panic because we're seeing people get publicly humiliated and fired for having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, even if there is zero indication that they did anything illegal. And because some of the allegations to come out of the Epstein files are so obviously false, including ones about Trump, unfortunately. I do not think that he sexually assaulted a child, although it does sound like the FBI covered up some of those allegations, which is a scandal in itself. But there is so much obvious nonsense coming out of these files, nonsense people are taking seriously, that when I hear something like this, dog rape, triple murder, police taking bets on what exactly, I'm not sure, red rooms, my first instinct is doubt. But, I'm not in the UK. I don't know much about this case or the cultural context here. The only Pakistani I know works at Google and has 2 golden doodles. I don't think he's representative of immigrants to the UK. So I wanted to check my gut on this with someone who knows more about it. So Helen, what was your first response to this statement? Am I just a huge bitch for casting doubt on the dog rape and triple murder story? What do you think about this?
I don't think so. My first response to that is that I would like to see some dates and,
evidence.
It's all so vague. And so to give people a background on this, there are 2 different things going on. One is that the government under Labour has promised an official inquiry into the grooming gangs. However, that seems to be being slow walked by the civil service. There's no great enthusiasm for it because they think it'll be incredibly divisive and provide fuel to the far right. And then secondary to that is this,
because the perpetrators were mostly Asian immigrants, right?
not exclusively. Like there was a white grooming gang in Glasgow a while ago, but yes, particularly British Pakistanis, particularly from the Mirpur region, are overrepresented in the stats. Although we don't know exactly to what extent, because the police have been until now pretty sporadic about recording even like self-identified perpetrator ethnic data. So Louise Casey, who was kind of the government troubleshooter, was asked to look into this, and she said, a bit like Cass actually, she was like, well, the first thing I can tell you is that actually the data collection until now has been pretty shoddy. So the first thing I would want to do is to really like understand the contours of this problem. But that's, so that's allegedly going on in the background. Labour had to be kind of dragged kicking and screaming towards that. They wanted local inquiries, really. And I understand that skepticism, because if you look, we've got a COVID inquiry going on at the moment. It's going to cost millions upon millions. It's going to report 10 years later, and mostly it's going to provide some very nice work for lawyers. And the next pandemic will probably be completely different. So I can see Andrew Norfolk, who now unfortunately died, he really broke the story on the front page of the Times when he reported on the trials. Incredibly courageous piece of reporting. He was very ambivalent about the idea of an official inquiry because he thought it would just, essentially be a lot of middle-class people making a lot of money and actually not really help any of the people involved. And I know people who've testified at the child sexual abuse inquiry who said they would basically re-traumatize themselves telling this story again to people, and nothing seemed to really come out of it. So that's one thing that's happening. At the same time, Rupert Lowe, who was a former chair of, let me get this right, Southampton.
Wait, well, let me interrupt you quick. And the inquiry, is the goal here to figure out why these cases were not prosecuted in the beginning? What's the end goal of this, of making this sort of government panel?
So the government panel's aim is to be like, what lessons can we learn for better policing of this and better reporting? And, whatever. Rupert Lowe's, in his own one-man band independent inquiry, which is what you quoted from, I don't think necessarily has such lofty aims. I think his is more about, as he would see it, like casting light onto a scandal that the liberal intelligentsia don't want you to talk about. So he's doing.
And who is he?
Well, yeah. So he used to be in Nigel Farage's party Reform, but Nigel Farage has a problem, which is that as soon as anyone else's massive ego clashes with Nigel Farage's massive ego, they lose to Nigel Farage. So he is now out. He's got his own party, which is called Reclaim, Restore. They've all got slightly the same name, all of these parties. And he basically has one massive fan, and that fan is Elon Musk. Elon Musk boosts him all the time because Elon Musk doesn't like Nigel Farage, because Nigel Farage won't let Tommy Robinson, the kind of far-right provocateur who's now in Miami, because everyone ends up in Miami eventually. He won't...
Or Arizona.
Yeah, right. He won't... He won't let Tommy Robinson into Reform, his party. So Elon Musk has fallen out with Nigel Farage.
And is Loa an MP?
Yeah, he's now an independent MP.
Okay.
And so he's doing this funny thing of he both claims that the media won't cover it, but he also won't let journalists into any of the sessions. So it's one of those classic things, and you see it often with people on the left do this too, where a load of like completely nebulous, unverifiable stuff is handed out, and it's like, why won't journalists just take this on trust and uncritically report it and like, well, just parrot what I've said, essentially.
Right. So if you look up Rupert Lowe rape inquiry, so this I'm not sure if this happened on your timeline as well, but this was every post on my timeline was this, and mostly from Americans. So if you look up Rupert Lowe rape inquiry, though, there's no stories about this, which I found very surprising. Those allegations, triple murder, dog rape, are so... I figured American outlets would cover it. They don't appear to be, unless the Google news search is completely broken, which is possible. And nothing from the UK. I mean, there are stories about the rape inquiry, but nothing about these particular allegations.
But it's a bit like, remember when Tara Reid made all those accusations about Joe Biden touching her up? And everybody was reluctant because the right-wing people had no incentive to look into whether or not they were true. And the left-wing people looked into it, found that it wasn't massively true, but it's also quite hard to give someone a kind of clean bill of health. And so you end up with this slightly odd feeling that no one was really looking into it. What's probably more likely to happen is that people have nothing... Like, how do you follow up How do you follow up that story and report whether or not it's
Right.
true? She's given haven't got the name of the person, you haven't got the town it happened in, you haven't got the date, the time frame. She said that there are people murdered.
Who are
That's
they?
to me is a red flag because when girls disappear, even girls who were in care,
Someone notices.
yeah, right, and they don't turn up or they turn up murdered or dead.
Right.
That you would that expect that to get reported. That's not always true, right? Like that guy got away with murdering all those gay men and leaving them propped up against headstones, and it was recorded as natural causes, and he was actually knocking them off.
Wait, where was this?
And these are this was in Britain.
And when? When?
Stephen Merchant played him in a recent drama. If you want to watch it, but it was basically like the police were like, "Oh, these gays, they're always doing the chemsex,
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there were
But
situations.
girls,
in which
minors is, I think, different. And we're
yeah.
presumably talking because Rupert Lowe, because of Who Cares About, we're presumably talking about young white girls. Someone would have noticed.
Right, but young white girls in care probably. That's the girls who are mostly targeted by grooming gangs. But even so, had there been 3 teenagers disappear in a small town within a period of 5 years,
Right.
you even the British police might ask some questions about that. So that's one of the things that gives me. Also, I don't know if someone's been raped by a dog and they film it and play it back. What are you betting on?
Right, that's the question. Betting on what?
It's not like a Porsche rate. Like,
And how do you? I have a dog. I have a dog who is an intact male. Like, how would you? It's not like dogs are like naturally sexually attracted to humans. It's not like humans are in heat. The mechanics of this, I find it questionable.
okay, on that bit, I've got really terrible news for you, which is that there was a recent
God.
story about a drag queen who died in Cardiff a couple of years ago, and there were suspicions it was a hate crime, and they closed the streets for his cortege to go through. And then the inquest happened a couple of weeks ago, and he was found with dog semen inside him. And the thesis was that he died maybe because he was allergic to dog semen.
Oh my God. Okay, but was it rape? That's the question. Or was he?
Well,
yes.
the story from the guy who testified at the inquest was that this other guy was out walking his dog at 2 a.m. and they bumped into the drag queen.
No.
And the drag queen started having sex with his dog. And the guy was like, I wasn't into it, but I didn't, but I let it carry on. And you're like, I mean, sure. Obviously, it was not in the coroner's court's inquest to go, sure, Jan.
Yeah.
Sure, Jan. But no, I'm afraid people are out there having sex with dogs, Katie.
No, I fully believe that people are out there having sex with dogs. What I struggle with is the non-consensual aspect of it. People intentionally having sex with dogs, yes, but a dog raping a person, I think that's different.
Right. And I think it's like Christopher Hitchens always used to say this about religion, which is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yes.
Like, I am open to the fact that might have happened, but I really want to hear a lot. Like, I would not put that in the paper till I had fully checked that out.
The other thing about this is that if this doesn't check out, if he never provides any more evidence, if this story is just out there, then by putting this out there in a way that I personally find very irresponsible, I think he's diminishing the seriousness of the actual rape gangs themselves. He's giving people a reason to cast doubt on other girls and women's testimony.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I always think that you need to do journalism on controversial subjects, because otherwise you're leaving the field clear to partisans of various types. And just as, people from that tendency are not wrong to say that talking about this has made the mainstream, particularly liberals, uncomfortable. It is equally true to say that it has been seized on by the far right to imply that only brown men do rapes. Like, I nearly got into a fight. It's one of these, I won't mention them because I don't need to get into any more beefs, but then like an anti-woke commenter was just having a go and saying like, why aren't you writing more of this stuff about the grooming gangs? And I thought about saying, have you never shown any interest in the Pellico case? Right? And you haven't. And you haven't because there is no narrative there that is to say that the libs won't talk about this. That is just a thing that happened. It was mostly white guys in rural France. And it's interesting for a whole bunch of different reasons. But like race isn't a part of it. And so it doesn't fit neatly into your anti-woke, they won't let you talk about this kind of framing. You're just not interested in, how many people are interested in stories about sexual abuse of women qua sexual abuse of women, right? Versus how many people of them are only interested when that sexual abuse is done by their political opponent or a disfavored group, whether it be millionaires in the case of Epstein or whether it be Asians in the case of the grooming gangs.
Right. So Rupert Lowe, part of his platform is mass deportations. He's the MAGA, is that what you call it, of the UK. very Britain first. And, there does seem to be some danger here of this becoming a racist witch hunt based on the tweets that I was seeing or the X posts that I was seeing, which is kind of ironic because it's also true that the early reports of the grooming gangs were ignored by media, at least. I don't know about police because of this, but because they were afraid of appearing racist. Julie Bindel has talked about this. And so by ignoring it, when eventually it all comes out, which of course it did, people are having some, pretty racist reactions to it, as though, the fact that some Pakistani immigrants or Asian immigrants are rapists means that no immigrants belong in the UK. So, I saw this post the other day from an account called Power Bottom Dad 1. I guess Power Bottom Dad was taken. The rape of England. The amount of rape in England has quadrupled in 10 years, now the highest in the Western world, about 100 times worse per 100,000 people than Poland. What changed? He included a graph there. And his implication is that it was immigration. It's who is immigrating to the UK. That's what changed. And it is true that before Brexit, more immigrants to the UK were European. Post-Brexit, EU immigration is down. Immigration from Africa, Asia, the Middle East is up. And I do think maybe it's worth mentioning for our American listeners that the Asian immigrants that you get tend to be of a different demographic than the ones that we get in the US. This is something that Jessica, the 80s baby, pointed out to me. She said, you guys get the Muslim immigrants who actually are the mythical doctors and engineers. That's true. Our immigration system tends to reward highly skilled workers, H-1B visas, or at least until now, while the UK gets more refugees and low-skilled workers. And of course, I'm not saying that highly skilled workers don't rape people and refugees do. That's obviously not true, although it would also be sort of silly to pretend that there's not a correlation between, poverty and low educational attainment and higher rates of violent crime. That's real. And so Jessica said, I think these stories sound particularly unbelievable if your reference point is Zohran Mandami, but a lot more plausible if Jamal from the corner shop used to look down your top when you were a teenager. But in this case, Power Bottom Dad his numbers are just wrong. So Reuters fact check this. And let me just read you from their fact check. Online posts that claim that United Kingdom has the highest rape per capita among the world's developed economies are missing key context, including that rape in the UK is defined more broadly than in other countries. So what changed is not immigration. What changed is how rape is defined and reported. And in places where there are robust legal systems where they actually punish rapists and protect victims, you're more likely to see victims report assaults. So according to Power Bottom 1, Indonesia has among the lowest rape in the world, but that's actually because Indonesia doesn't prosecute rape. Marital rape was legal until 4 years ago.
And I think in some rural bits of the country, you still have Sharia law that sort of says if you are raped, then you're committing adultery, right? And you're also culpable for a sexual crime, which is a powerful disincentive to reporting.
Right.
Yeah, I also think part of this comes to part of a broader thing that's happened with the American right on X particularly, which is, again, you see it in the tweets of Elon Musk, this belief that Europe has been kind of invaded by Muslims and that this is something that is imminently happening to America. And you see Elon Musk does a lot of tweets about the Shire and how we're just the hobbits of the Shire, the white people of Britain, and we don't realize that the orcs are coming and we need the hard men of Gondor, apparently Elon Musk, to kind of come and save us from this. And and it's kind of, and you see it all the time. You get these conservative men who sort of say London is a no-go area. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the homicide statistics, look at the violent crime statistic, compare them with DC, and it's just son,
right.
Yeah. Even probably cities in red states will have more violent crime than the UK, just because apart from anything else, we just have many fewer guns, right? So our mad people have to stab people individually rather than going on a rampage and being able to take out dozens at a time.
Yeah, a few years ago, Andy No went to London and did one of these stories about Muslims invading the UK, and he went to some area of London where they had signs that said basically no public intoxication, and he said that this was evidence of Sharia law. And it turns out it's just you're not allowed to have open containers, every American city except for New Orleans.
Right, they banned drinking on the tube just for everybody because it was probably rowdy rugby lads.
Sharia law. That's Sharia law.
It's creeping Sharia. Yeah, so I don't dismiss that there is a problem in some British Asian communities that are very insular. I was doing a talk with
Sure.
Alice Evans, who wrote a most amazingly titled Substack, which was like what links Epstein files, grooming gangs, and something else that was incredibly incendiary. But, she pointed out to me that some British Asian communities score higher on social conservatism and religiosity than their origin communities back in Southeast Asia.
Interesting.
And that's partly about the influence of radical Islam. The Saudi Arabia has spent a lot of money over the last couple of decades preaching very strict interpretations of Islam and funding that. And also because people who are in minorities in a country can end up feeling quite embattled and that they're losing touch with their culture. And so they send their kids to like after school madrasas. And so you end up in these situations. And lots of, traditionally, lots of these people in Britain would have sent home for a home, quote unquote, for a wife, right? This would have been a thing as well, that they would have brought over women with less economic power and education, who then would have been much less likely to work, who would then been much less likely to have to learn to speak English. All of these things that make it possible for kind of more domestic and sexual abuse to happen. And you can't extract the grooming gang story from the story about the fact that in places where it happened, very often, whichever clan network it was, they controlled the nighttime economy. Like they ran the taxi service, would be the classic one. And so, there are all of these things, added to which misogyny is definitely part of this, not just on the racialized misogyny of the Asian men who think that white women are kind of slags. Right. And because they're wandering around in short skirts, they're kind of everybody's property. But the misogyny of the police to whom it was reported, who thought, so what if a 15-year-old girl is having sex with 10 men a night?
Right.
Like she's a tearaway. She's chosen to do this. They didn't treat it in some of these cases as just straight up and down, obviously child rape, something that no one could consent to. And, so that I don't mind talking about this subject, but it just seems like no one is able to have a fully coherent conversation about it. From either side, there are kind of things that they don't want to bring into the full picture.
Well, so I wrote Julie Bindel because she did some of the first reporting on these rape gangs. And I asked her what she thought of Rupert Lowe's statement. And she said, I've heard worse, to be honest. Some of these men are proper sadists. I've met the woman at the center of the allegations and she seemed credible, but Lowe would spin any yarn for political gain. So I don't know. I really don't. She also gave her own testimony for Lowe's inquiry. And she said, much as I dislike Rupert Lowe and all he stands for, it was a platform not made available by our current government. I wanted to give evidence of my knowledge of these gangs and also support some of the survivors and their parents that chose to give evidence. So Julie is a little bit credulous on this than I think you or I are, but I'm skeptical. Dogs, skeptical. And also, as you pointed out, dogs are haram.
Dogs are haram, like very notoriously. You don't get
rape is not. Dogs are.
But yeah, no, I think Julie's instinct is a good one, which is that lots of the women who've complained about this haven't been listened to, and Julie is always on the side of survivors.
Yeah.
My interest in it is always purely from that journalistic.
Yes.
What can I prove? Because that's the hardest thing in the world, right? And actually, it's the only thing that makes allegations get taken seriously is nailing them down.
Right, and that's the case of Giselle Pellico. I mean, without the video evidence, and if her husband hadn't been arrested for upshotting women on public transit, I might not have believed that story. I'll admit that
100% and completely. Absurdly, like the idea that you would find 100 men within 40 miles of a tiny village in rural France who are not only willing to rape an unconscious woman, but be videotaped by some guy they just met on the internet doing it. People are, you'd think, well, no one's that stupid. Never mind never mind the being a massive sadistic pervert. You'd think, well, that sounds like a very dumb thing to let yourself be recorded doing. And no, they were that stupid.
Fun. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. You ready to talk about Lindy West?
I am so ready to talk about Lindy West.
Okay. Well, before we get to that, let's do housekeeping. Helen, it's your moment.
This is a podcast on which I sometimes
not
appear.
A video podcast.
Not a video podcast.
Just so people know. They are. I don't know if this is happening on your Netflix. Do you guys have Netflix in the UK?
Yes.
Yeah, you must have because you have all
we
of
just
those,
watched The Fire.
You have all of those David Tennant shows. They are doing, Netflix now has fucking podcasts.
Yeah. Well, podcasts do great numbers on YouTube. Some people know
not mine.
I do the Private Eye podcast and I lobbied for that to go on video just because we reliably get 200 or 300,000 views on YouTube. Just of us just sitting there being unphotogenic. And nonetheless, people are apparently willing to watch this.
I refuse to do this. This is why I every time I do a video thing for any sort of podcast, I always have my microphone as much in front of my face as possible. It makes for a great video.
Right. The microphone burker, if you will.
Yeah.
Anyway, you should go to blockedandreported.org where you can sign up for extra episodes every month for primos. You also therefore get to join, I say like a Discord. No, there's certainly the comments section, which is...
There's the chat.
As we're going to find out in the AMA, quite lively and has asked some truly alarming questions.
Very inappropriate.
So it's a lovely community to join.
That's enough. Just please join us. $7 a month, blockedandreported.org. It is the best way to keep the show going. Really the only way to keep the show going, and I'm begging you to do it. All right. Let's talk about Lindy West and 2010's feminism.
Well, I want you to set the scene because there kept being references to The Stranger and the Pacific Northwest. And I thought, okay, so Katie must have met this person. So can you give us an idea about like how important was Lindy West to 2010's culture?
So I have not actually met Lindy West. I've never had the pleasure. I came after she was at The Stranger. She was there quite a few years before my time. She moved from The Stranger to Jezebel. She was a columnist for the New York Times for a while. She's extremely popular in Seattle, very beloved, and her whole family is. So her dad was a local jazz musician. He passed away a few years ago. Her husband, Aham, as we will hear about, husband now in a throuple. Now they have dual custody of the husband. His sister, Ijeoma Oluo, who you sent me a link to. She had an interesting take on not actually interesting. She had a predictable take on the BAFTAs controversy. Ijeoma writes about race. Full disclosure, I hate that bitch. I've also
right, okay.
I've also never met Ijeoma in person, but after my G-Trans, she's very important, well liked in Seattle. Both of these people are they get asked on the public radio station. I don't. They have events people come to in Seattle. I don't. After my D-Transit, so Lindy had been a staffer at The Stranger. Ijeoma did a lot of freelance work there, including at one point they flew her to Spokane and she interviewed Rachel Dolezal, who at that point had adopted a Nigerian name that was also the name of Ijeoma's sister, Ndichi, something like that. And at the time, at the time I thought the piece was hilarious and brilliant. And then Ijeoma was mad at me and I decided that she was a bully. But after my Detransitioner article came out in 2017, Ijeoma, who again, much more popular than I, especially at the time where nobody had heard of me, and with like genuine power in this community. Actually, Ijeoma and I have met. We did an event together after Trump was elected. We did a panel discussion, but that was the only time I met her. She got on Facebook Live and was on, like in her car crying for like an hour about my Detransitioner piece, and then announced that she would no longer write for The Stranger because of me. I was a freelancer who had published like 2 articles for The Stranger. Nobody knew she was fucking bullying me. So
no, but also didn't Lindy West have a run-in with Dan Savage?
Oh yes. So yes, much more importantly. So Lindy is fat. And I'm not. I don't have Tourette's.
That's not just you being rude, by the way, like it's a big part of her writing identity.
Yes. Yeah. And Dan is
thin.
A man who is he is thin, but he was also alive in the, he's a Gen Xer. Actually, he's a boomer. He's that old. He's like the last of the boomers. And Dan wrote some things in the 90s and earlier 2000s that were politically incorrect about fat people. And this was before the fat positivity movement. It was also back when you could say basically whatever you wanted. But Lindy was offended by this, and she wrote an essay. She wrote a blog post, like basically calling him out. And then that later got turned into a book called Shrill, which was about her time at The Stranger and also about sort of fat positivity. It was a memoir. Shrill got turned into a show on Hulu starring A.D. Bryant in the Lindy character, although we find out and Lindy was a writer for that. And we found out in the memoir that this was apparently a terrible experience. But at the time, she sort of... I don't know, did you watch Shrill?
No, I didn't. I mean, to recap, she is essentially like one of the big beasts of 2010's feminism, both through Jezebel, Guardian, New York Times. As you said, she wrote a piece about Me Too that was very popular, that was like, this is a witch hunt. Yes, we're witches and we're hunting you.
The witches are coming. Yeah.
He early on wrote a piece saying, having a go at rape jokes in comedy, which caused an enormous backlash and made her kind of like the punchline to every, like, oh, Lindy West wouldn't like that. And then post Trill and post marriage to a ham, am I getting his name? She kind of went a bit quiet.
Yeah. And she also, so she got off of Twitter years ago. And there is something about when you like, what's his name? Atlantic writer, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Like once you leave, if you're lucky, you can reach a certain amount of success where you no longer have to be on Twitter. But you also, and I did this, I mean, not because I reached a certain amount of success, but because I was just tired of embarrassing myself. You do sort of remove yourself from the public conversation.
Yeah, you cash out, essentially. You go like, I've got enough attention, like I'm cashing in my chips and I'm going to go and be famous.
I can get a book contract, or a TV show or whatever.
So the reason I wanted to talk to you about her was that she's got a new memoir out that's called Adult Braces. And it is catching up on like everything that happened with being super successful and then everything that happened with this fairy tale marriage to a ham. And spoiler alert, it's not so happy. So there's an interview that I watched before I read the memoir from October 2022, which is her talking about the fact that she's in a throuple, and she and
wait, let's do a little bit more of the backstory.
Okay.
First. So she and a ham fairy tale marriage. It turns out that it was not a fairy tale marriage, which we learned through this memoir, that a ham, when they first got together, they broke up, and then when they were sort of reconnecting, her father died, they reconnected. He had a stipulation, which is that their relationship had to be non-monogamous, and she didn't want this, but she grudgingly went along with it, sort of telling herself, he's a touring musician. If it happens, they had this sort of don't ask, don't tell policy. If it happens, it'll happen on the road. It'll be a one-night stand. I'll never have to hear about it, and probably he won't do it anyway. I think this is a fairly common thing to convince yourself of, especially if you're the party who doesn't want it.
Right. But the reason that I bring up the 2022 interview is before this new memoir came out, the approved version that was presented to the world was, it was a little bit difficult for me when my husband hooked up with a girlfriend who, and Lindy is very open about this in the book, is
tiny,
thin.
She's like 5 feet,
very and very conventionally attractive. She's like a little nymph, and and it was very much. And then and now I fancy her too, and like everything is super happy. We're not sister wives, like we are one smoking hot banging throuple, and then
with a big bed,
right? And then you get. This is the bit that troubles me. And also the thing that she was saying about being a fat activist was like, I'm happy about it, right? Like I want, and I became a symbol of like somebody who was okay with their weight. The world tried to shame me and I wasn't. And then in this book, you find out that the story is much more complicated on both of those fronts, actually. And in a way that I was it made me very angry, actually, because I thought all the way through, Lindy 3 years ago would have said, someone like me who says, that sounds like a horrible thing for your husband to do to you, would have said, no, I'm happy. I choose my choice.
Right. So the backstory here is that they have this arrangement. She thinks he's never really going to act on it. And if she finds out, and if he does, she won't find out. A fan DMs her and says, spoiler alert, sorry, everyone, I saw your husband making out with someone at a bar. She confronts him. And his response to that is, long pause, I'm polyamorous. And it turns out that it wasn't just this one person. And she's not clear in this story. So the other woman's name is Roya, that they're now in a throuple with. She's not clear if that woman he was kissing at the bar was Roya or someone else. It turns out later, you get halfway through the book and you find out that it wasn't just this one person. There was at least one other. And he seems to treat polyamory as though it's an orientation rather than a lifestyle, right? I made the choice to fuck other people. I am polyamorous. Like he was born that way, And yes, you're right. Like this is the sort of thing that I think Lindy of not that long ago would have called bullshit on. Like, was Joseph Smith, was he born that way? Was Osama bin Laden born that way?
Yeah.
Are all men born that way, or is it a choice that they make because they want to fuck other people?
Right, that's the thing. There's a bit halfway through the memoir where she writes, I told you Ahan was secretly seeing one woman in 2019. He was actually seeing two. And you're like, okay, so how am I supposed to trust like
What can we trust?
A word you say in this memoir if everything gets like no, actually I really need to admit this. And the same thing, she goes to a therapist to try and get diagnosed with ADHD because she thinks it will explain the executive functioning issues that she's had all the way through her life. And she gets very miffed because the therapist tells her she's too high functioning to have ADHD, and B, they want to talk to her mother to talk about her childhood. And she says, none of my friends had to have this intrusive process with their mothers. And I'm like, well, in that case, your friends were diagnosis shopping because ADHD is a developmental disorder. If it didn't develop in childhood, it isn't like you. If you only notice,
there's no adult onset,
right?
Or if there's maybe a brain tumor,
but like then it's something else. Then it's a different executive function disorder. This is a developmental disorder. So they should 100% be looking into your childhood, because guess what? If you suddenly developed executive functioning issues suddenly a year ago, we do need to check you for that, like brain tumor or whatever it might be.
Right.
So
her doctor sounded so responsible.
I know.
Like I don't think I've ever heard of a doctor not giving someone Adderall when they ask for Adderall.
The only true honest doctor left in America is like,
you can get it online.
It honestly sounds more like anxiety. Have you thought about getting some CBT? Then there's a great bit when she gets very cross about Ozempic. And she says, Wegovy has been approved for children as young as 12 when we don't even know the long-term physical effects, let alone the mental ones. And you're like, wow, great point. I wonder if there are any other drugs we should maybe be really careful about giving to adolescents.
Yeah. The fat part was, so much of this book, I felt sorry for her. And when she writes about her fatness and the way that she's been treated, it is very affecting. Although I also was thinking 40% of Americans are fat. Like it's like,
but not in the circles.
Although she lives in Seattle,
she moves in, right? And I do think she has had lots of people use her weight as a punchline to dismiss her opinions, right? Which is like, you're only a feminist because you're ugly. And I can't,
right.
I've had some of that. I'm sure you've had some of that. Like, it's just a knee-jerk response of dicks on the internet.
Right.
Just be like, why do I need to listen to you? I don't want to fuck you.
I think that's true. But I also think that she has benefited from her fatness in a way that she wouldn't have if she were born 10 or 20 years earlier, because she was born at the right time for the fat positivity movement. I mean, she is very talented. She's very funny. No question about that. But being unapologetically fat brought her fans and attention. She doesn't look like Andrea Dworkin. She's very pretty.
Right. And I think the fat positivity movement emerged for the best of reasons as a kind of cope for the fact that almost no one managed to lose weight naturally on their own. Like, once you bust your metabolism, your body always wants to get back to that weight, and it will make you hungry until you eat until you do.
Right.
So it was, it was a response to saying, well, look, we can't cure this. Almost no one the diets work for. So let's just accept ourselves as we are. And then came along the GLP-1s. And the interesting thing to me is I feel like no moral feelings about GLP-1s, right? If they, in the same way I like high blood pressure medicine or statins. And so her view, which is that they're kind of immoral, I think, actually, right? She massively hams up the side effects to a level that if you really believe that the side effects for GLP-1s are that bad, you also wouldn't vaccinate your kids, right? But it has to be that they're all a lie and big pharma, and there's, and you can't just go, do you know what? It's actually a bit nicer when I weigh a bit less. Like, I don't, it's not like a moral thing one way or another. It's not immoral to be fat, but neither is it immoral to want to lose weight if your weight is causing you problems.
Right. It reminded me, her writing about Ozempic reminded me of people who are hardliners against drugs like naltrexone, which, my book is about. Her writing about her feelings about food reminded me of alcohol and drug addiction because of the sort of constant obsession, her patterns. Like, she talked about eating in her car in secret, throwing away candy wrappers so no one would see, the shame. All of that was very familiar to me. She's got that, like I wrote in my book about sort of the booze noise, the obsession, that this mental loop I could never seem to get out of. And she has that with food. She also says she was in constant physical and emotional pain, but she refuses to go on these drugs for sort of purity reasons or political reasons. Her explanation didn't quite even make sense to me, but she seems to be like these people in AA who think that, and not everyone in AA, hashtag not all AA, there's this idea that using a drug to get out of addiction is cheating. You have to do it the hard way. Why? Why?
I mean, I think there's, and she does gesture towards this, I think, at a couple of points. I think if she suddenly went down to being 9 stone overnight, like in the way that,
What is that? Nice.
oh yeah, I guess, I don't know, like 60
90
kilograms.
pounds?
No, like, yeah,
I don't 60 kilograms. What the hell is that?
I've gone more European, not less. No, it's like, so
90 pounds.
no, that's way less than
100 pounds.
10 stone is 140 pounds. So, but if she went down to being like a size 10, right? Like a mid-size,
Yeah.
a US size 10, then it would be a bit like Amy Schumer, right? People would be like,
Yeah.
but I loved you. You were my icon, that you were happy, and therefore I didn't need to be ashamed. Are you now telling me that you weren't happy? Was all this a lie?
She nods to that too. She says that, that she talks about how she felt triggered by seeing fat people lose weight.
Right.
And she also talks about how she felt owned by the fat positivity movement. So she has these very sort of conflicting views in her head that I don't know. She never seems to align them to me in the book.
What would you say was your biggest red flag that you felt that you read about her relationship? Because I have a couple of bids.
Biggest red flag. The fact that he was fucking other people. That's a pretty big one.
I think for me, when it got to like, this guy has moved in like at least 2 other girlfriends, and also then his breadwinner wife.
What, wait,
and then
so
it said,
wait, only one of them lives with them.
Right. But you know what I mean? Like he's got like a wife who's got the
Right.
big high powered job, and then he's got
Right.
like the sort of wife for fun. And
Who quit her job, Roya, so the other wife, she was a artistic director in Portland. So another thing about this, they're broke. They have no money. And they moved from, Lindy says that in something that they got priced out of Seattle, out of their apartment in Seattle. She's a New York Times bestseller who had a fucking television show based on her life, who has earning capacity. They were broke. And I think this is because of poor money management. She says that she has this throwaway line in the book about how the IRS took away her passport for not paying taxes. I think that's true. So basically she and a Hom who has 2 children. She like mentions, did you notice this?
which are from another even more previous wife.
Yeah, he had kids as a teenager. Their kids are actually grown now. But she just like casually, like there's like 2 lines about having kids, about like her stepchildren or her children in the book, but doesn't explain the fact that there are children at all in this fucked up dynamic.
There's a line in Tim mentions Storm about like people who believe in homeopathy, where it's like a pigeonhole has begun to form, which is rapidly filled with pigeon when she tells me her name is Storm. And there was a bit when she said, when there's a footnote that says Aham is non-binary, he, they. And I was like, in what way is this guy and his Mormon sister wise non-binary? Come on.
He calls himself queer. This fucking guy who she refers to as he in the book, and then in the body of the book, and in the acknowledgments calls they. I guess they was too confusing for when you're talking about a throuple, it is particularly confusing. But she switches in the acknowledgments. Dude, my culture is not your costume. If you're going to talk like that, if you're going to call yourself queer, put a dick in your ass. Having 2 girlfriends doesn't make you queer.
Well, I mean,
Joseph Smith.
I just don't see any evidence at all that he's attracted to men, or that his style is at all femme, right?
I looked at his Instagram yesterday, and he has a photo of himself wearing a pink hat for Pride.
That's what women do. And yeah.
Yes.
And then, so then the other bit that was a major red flag is when she's in the middle of being super depressed, they decide that actually the thing that's going to get her out of this, because she's not taking care of herself, is that they're going to have a dom-sub relationship that's based around him telling her to have a shower every day.
Yeah.
And that actually, and I was just like, what in the in loco parentis is this?
Yeah.
Like, so your boyfriend now has to just basically run your life for you.
Right. But he can't either. He's too irresponsible to pay the fucking bills, so they're broke. So they need to move Roya in because she's responsible enough to put labels on the leftovers and make sure the bills are paid. I actually thought there is a part, she writes in the end of the book sort of trying to, I think, convince everybody and herself that this is actually what she wants. She's really happy. And she writes this little section about how Roya takes care of stuff. And I thought about you because I thought she got a wife.
Yeah.
this is what she got a wife, like you write about in your Genius book. You know, Lindy finally got someone because her husband can't take responsibility enough to make sure the bills are paid. She got the assistant she needed. It's just that she's fucking her husband.
Yeah, and I know, she says this in the book that people will say this and it's not true, but I'm afraid I'm going to go out and say it. I don't think that she's particularly sexually attracted to Roya. I think she's just
not gay.
No, and like, do you know what, Katie? Some people aren't gay, and that's fine. We have to be accepting of that.
I hear that from Phoebe Maltz-Bovey. I've tried to convince her she's wrong, that all women are a little bi, but
but
I think she's not.
Right, but no, I think lots more women than men are a little bit bi.
Yes,
but some are like 100% down the line heterosexual. They just like dick.
Yes.
Not at all interested in pussy. And I just think, I just do not get the vibe from her that she is actually super into it. And all their messages to each other that she reproduces in the book are like the most formal things, like, "Dear sir, I wrote to you on the 16th inst to say."
Yeah.
And it just, you know what it really reminded me of? It reminded me of another throuple, another great throuple of our time, the Laverys.
Yep, I knew that was coming. Yep.
Because there's a line in the great New York, what is it? It's the New York Magazine piece about their super sexy, in which Daniel Lavery, formerly...
Okay, so will you backstory this for anybody who missed this particular episode?
So Grace Lavery, formerly
Joe,
a chap, now a trans woman, married Mallory Ortberg, formerly a writer for The Toast, so another great 2010s feminist writer.
So we've got a reverse heterosexual couple.
They both transitioned. And so now Grace is a trans woman, Danny's a trans man. Mm-hmm. Danny dropped his surname because there was he fell out with his family. There was a child abuse scandal in their church. Mm-hmm. And then at some point they move in a woman called Lily, who is again thin and conventionally attractive, who then has Grace's baby. Mm-hmm. And then they do a thing about how it's great and they all sleep in the same bed. But there's this very telling line from Daniel about how he and Lily were on, quotes, company manners with each other for a while.
Yeah.
And that sounds to me a lot like my husband moved in a girlfriend and I didn't really know how to talk to her, rather than, man, this is some sexy times we're all having here in this extremely equal relationship.
It sounds so coercive. It does. And I feel a little bad not believing Lindy or Daniel's story when they insist that they're happy. I don't want to accuse somebody of false consciousness. You know, this is one of my beef with certain strains of feminism, not believing that someone can be a surrogate or a prostitute and actually enjoy it. I think that is possible for people to do, and people should in general be taken for their word. But if you write a memoir and your memoir reveals that everything that you said before was maybe not entirely true, why should we believe you now?
Right, that's how I feel. I just sort of think, okay, well, let me just, that great line I'm sure I mentioned it before, the Christopher Hitchens line about, whenever he's setting his watch, whenever some Republican senator comes out and says something homophobic and you'll be found in a truck stop bathroom. I kind of feel like when I was reading this, I was like, I'm going to just set my watch for when you break up with a ham and then you do the memoir about, actually, and I've really thought about this and I wasn't into it. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know what? I'm kind of allowed to be, because you've written a memoir and I'm allowed to have opinions on it. And those are my opinions, really.
I felt the same way about her writing about Shrill. So the Hulu series, which I thought was pretty good. There were some, like the book, there's a lot of virtue signaling in the TV show. The book has a lot of sort of throwaway lines about white people, not Lindy, but other white people. She's one of the good ones.
Karens and Trump voters,
yes. Yeah, she does this road trip through the South and is basically judgmental of whatever. It's exactly what you would expect. But when she writes about Shrill, her public persona during that time, the sense I got from Lindy and from the others who were involved was that this was a empowering experience. You had a fat positive writer's room. You had a fat positive set. Had this ever happened before? They had this scene where all of these fat women are like dancing in this pool, and it was this incredible experience. Well, it turns out that working on Shrill was a fucking nightmare. Nobody wanted Lindy there. They were mean to her. They ignored her. The cast and crew would go out partying and not invite her. And she was depressed. She was depressed the whole time. Okay, well, I love knowing the truth now, but again, why should we believe what you say when it turns out that you've been obfuscating the truth this whole time?
But she's basically an influencer, isn't she? And you and I have had this discussion before about like the problem with influencers who turn their lives into content is that they're doing PR
Yes.
for them, the version of themselves. And so
Yes. The
when
current
Shrill was
version.
on,
Yeah.
right, she needed to do PR for Shrill. And the selling point of that show was like, hey, fellow fat women, like here's a show that you'll finally see yourself reflected in. It couldn't. And that's not journalism. That's PR, right? Like that's publicity. And I
Right.
feel like the same thing is that that this is again, it's like PR for the kind of the personal brand of Lindy West. And I felt quite sorry for her about that, but I also thought it told a bigger story, which was of that 2010s type of content that was very first person industrial complex. Because I got to the end of it and I thought, she did an amazing road trip. She went to some places I've been in America, like Wakulla Springs, that's outside Tallahassee, which is just a banger place to be. Savannah, Georgia, one of the most beautiful cities in America.
Eureka Springs, Bentonville. Yeah, she did the sort. Yeah, it was a good road trip. Although she did say that it was going to take her a month to drive from Seattle to the Keys and back again. And I read that part to Jana, and Jana said, "That's stupid. You can do that in 8 days. Come on, it is not a month-long road trip. It doesn't have to be."
I thought you were going to be judgmental about the van life aspect of it, after me being judgmental about the throuple. But the thing about it is that she doesn't do any reporting.
She barely talks to people.
It's so weird to me. And it just revealed to me that I used to be, I'm sure you were, like, she was an incandescent star of 2010's journalism, right? Like, she was the one everybody, like, looked like she had the absolute dream. And in a way, I texted Sarah Ditum to be like, this is, because who's also read the book, to be like, this has been better than reading a gratitude, like writing my gratitude journal, because I'm so happy that I went and did reporting and didn't do personal blogging and personal memoir, because although it might have seemed like she was super successful, she clearly did not enjoy that life.
No.
Like, it is not a nourishing way to be. And I just think it's kind of, imagine driving all the way through that and not being like super, and through post COVID too, like an incredibly interesting time politically for America. And you're just like, I don't know, it makes me sound like I'm from the 1950s or something, but like, yeah, all right, so your husband and his girlfriend are back in Seattle, but like there's life happening here too. And every so often she'll have a personal epiphany and like jump off a log, and it'll be very exciting. And I'm just going to be like, have you thought about being interested in other people?
Right. Her epiphanies are always about her. And of course, the final epiphany is that, yes, what I do really want is for my husband to move his girlfriend in. It's never about the world. She does this road trip across the country, drives to these interesting places, and returns exactly the same. She has no better understanding of America, no better understanding of the South, no better understanding of anybody who doesn't think like her. If anything, she seems more judgmental of the rare people that she actually encountered.
Right. There's not even a kind of sort of cliched, I met a Trump voter and they were actually nice to me personally, which that is just genuinely experience that will happen to you, right? If you go to a Trump rally, yes, there'll be a bit when they all shout at you about how you're the lying mainstream media, but actually everyone will be just really, I even went to a Ron DeSantis rally and everybody was really nice to me.
I mean, they'd arrest you if you say gay, but other than that, very nice.
Other than that, no, but you just meet charming young college Republicans wearing bow ties and with incredible teeth. And then, and they're very polite.
It's very Seattle. Lindy reminds me of somebody who has never actually met somebody who doesn't think exactly like she does. And when she goes on this road trip, those are the people she seeks out, are also people who still think exactly like she does.
Well, there are bits where you can kind of see her desperately trying to escape it, right? Like in the ADHD bits, there's bits where she wants to like take the piss out of this kind of level of self-absorption and her diagnosis seeking. And it really just strikes me that, in a way, white people say, kind of, why did woke produce any really good art? Did that period produce any really great art? And I can kind of see why I can't think of stuff that it did, because it was so doctrinaire and so unsubversive. Yeah. Right. You had I just think she's a fundamentally good writer. However, someone should confiscate her exclamation mark key.
Oh my God. But she writes like a blog. I mean, it's like the all caps, the exclamation points. It's very strange. Well, whatever, it's her style.
But there are flashes of genuinely brilliant writing in there.
Yes. Yes.
And so which makes it even sadder, really, that it's being used to this end, right? This undoubted talent that she has.
There's a section that is so funny about, so she rents this van And the van, they do these murals on the side of the vans. And the first van that they presented her was a van that had the mural was of like a Brazilian black woman with like a thong and a giant ass. And like the gas cap was like the woman's butthole. I mean, that section was genuinely very funny. Unfortunately, that's not the van that she ended up driving across the country.
I know. What would Hunter S. Thompson have done? He would have dived in the butthole van.
Oh yeah. There's also a section where she goes to get a tattoo and she refers to the tattoo artist as sir. And then she apologizes to him. She says, "Hey," I said gently, "I'm sorry I called you sir without asking your pronouns first." He, of course, is like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But she doesn't even seem to take the piss out of herself in that moment. She seems, and, books you write the book, it takes a year to get published. Maybe she wrote this before the Great Awakening totally crumbled and that still made sense. But that's a very good moment to take the piss out of yourself. And she was unable to find the humor in herself asking this man what his pronouns were.
Yeah, I just think, if she just spent, like, actually, given that they're all like Mormon, nothing would be better than for her to go and do a mission.
Mormons are way more fun, I have to tell you, than fucking Seattle leftists.
But you know what I mean? Like, genuinely, one of the brilliant things that Mormons do is they go and do their mission and they have to live somewhere completely different. Like, and the idea is, if your faith is strong and like whatever it is, you come back and you still want to be a Mormon. And I kind of think Seattle leftists should do a similar thing, which is that they should just go and live in like a really nice little college town in a red state and just meet some people who have completely different views to them.
Well, she moved to her family's cabin on the coast. She is now, the county that both of us live in now is much more, not ethnically, but much more politically diverse. My guess is that she does not engage with the actual locals here. That my guess is that she still sort of keeps to herself and sticks to the blue line in the county.
Yeah, it's kind of sad because it's like one of the great things about being a writer is just going and putting yourself among people whose starting point for how they make decisions about life and how they see the world is completely different to yours. Like, it's the most mind expanding thing. And I just think it's quite funny to go on an entire road trip across America and come back with the conclusion that you were right. Like, oh.
You were right, and so is your husband. What he just needs another girlfriend.
Just moving another girlfriend. Yeah, I know. I ended up feeling quite sad for her, which I'm sure she doesn't want my sympathy or my pity. But I just think she should find herself a nice young man who will love her just her. And if she just needs to be a boring monogamous straight woman, you're in your 40s now. Be subversive. It's fine. Like, live your best middle-aged life. Maybe you want to go to bed at 9 p.m. You want to eat at 5:30 and like a Floridian retired couple. These are the things that you can do in your 40s.
Exactly.
And you can just admit, I'm extremely basic. I like doing basic things.
Well, it's also, what's going to happen when the novelty wears off? Of this situation, how big is the bed? How many girlfriends is Aham going to be able to move in? Because he's queer. He's queer. He's poly. He's queer.
He might accidentally move in a boyfriend because he just doesn't even see gender.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Helen. Well, thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up for the free listeners, and we're going to stay on for the primos. If you want to listen to the rest of this episode and get 3 extra episodes a month and our entire back catalog, that's hundreds of extra episodes and much more, join us, blockedandreported.org. Our show is produced, as always, with help from Jessica, the 80s baby. See you next week.